Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Vera Temkov from Citrus. I've been working with AX since 2010, mainly on the technical side. Thank you all for joining this DynamicsCon conference and for giving your votes to my session in that high number. I'm going to talk about the regression suite automation tool from Microsoft. Here is the agenda of this session. I'm going to show you what is Airset, why do we need a tool like Airset. I will walk you through the architecture and the testing flow and also demonstrate that to you. I have summarized at the end some tips and tricks for this tool that you can use for your testing, and we will dive into your questions. It would have been nicer if we were in person, so I can see you raising hands. So how many of you know what Airset is and have experience with it? So I would know how detailed to be. But here we are in our digital world, so let me get started. Airset stands for Regression Suite Automation Tool. It's a desktop application from Microsoft that helps you automate your testing process. Basically what it does, it converts your task recorders into automated tests, and it is integrated with LCS and Azure DevOps, and all of this is done without any coding needed. Why do we need a tool like this to automate the testing? You know how Microsoft is forcing that one version concept and that you have 2 major releases per year, and every month also releases that you have to implement in your environment. So you can pause, yes, for 2 consecutive updates, but you have to validate, after applying that update, you have to validate that your business processes are still running. Having said that, you have to have a testing strategy or tool to validate your processes. This automation tool helps you minimize the testing effort, and it is integrated, it can be integrated with the build process in Azure DevOps. This way, you are adding some assurance that your core business processes will be tested automatically and are working after applying any update or changes. Let me walk you through the architecture and the testing flow. So we have LCS as a central application, which is linked to D365 for Finance and Azure DevOps. Next to these 3 applications, we have our testing tool, which can be any Windows 10 machine with a desktop application installation of the Airset. We are starting our processes with defining them in the business process modeler in LCS, and then we are doing the task recorders in D365 for Finance. Then we upload those recordings into the business process modeler, which automatically will create and synchronize with Azure DevOps and create test cases for each of the recording that we're going to upload. We can, in Azure DevOps, assign those test cases to a testing suite, which can be used later for the automation testing process. Now Airset comes into an action. We load the tests in Airset, which means everything from the Azure DevOps, that testing suite, is being loaded there with the recordings. We have a process that I'm going to demonstrate you in the demo, how actually those tests are being generated, but we hit run and the results are being displayed in Azure DevOps, where we can see and inspect why and how our test results were made with the Airset tool. What I'm not going to talk in the demo is the installation and configuration procedure. I'm providing you here a link to the installation and configuration process on the Microsoft documentation platform. And in the demo, I'm going to show how to create the test recorders, what to pay attention to when you're doing the test recorders in order to be later to use them in the automation testing process. Then I'm going to show you how to change those test cases and how to create derived test cases. That means you are recording one time, but you're using that recording in multiple test cases. I will show you that in the demo. And at the end, we will see how those test runs appear in Azure DevOps. Now let me switch to my demo machine. And we will start from LCS. I have created here in LCS a separate library in the business process modeler for this purpose. It is called Airset library, and underneath we have a business processes that we are going to define. We're going to create for the purchasing process 2 child business tasks. Here on the right side, I'm editing PO creation will be the first one. We're saying create purchase order and save. We want, after that purchase order is being created, we want to confirm it. And we will create one more child process here. Move it down, edit the name. It will be PO confirmation. And click Save. We have defined our processes that we want to run with the automation tool. Now we go into D365 for Finance to record the actions for each of those tasks. What is important to note and to point out is that you have to start every recording from the main dashboard. So I'm going to start the task recorder, create a recording, create a PO, PO creation, and start. Now we're going to navigate to accounts payable. I know it's a trivial example, but we want to show some of the possibilities of the Airset tool. So I'll click new for new purchase order, and we're going to type in our vendor. And what is important here to note is that the purchase order number here appears for the first time. And in order to be able to use one of the features that the task recorder provides, and to be able to change the confirmation to this purchase order, I'm going to do a right click, task recorder, and copy this value. And you can see it on the right that this particular purchase order number has been copied and pasted into the task recorder steps. This is important because this way the tool will generate this as a parameter that we can later use in a generic way to chain different test cases. I'm going to select the site and the warehouse, and I'm going to hit OK for the creation of our purchase order. Okay. Now I'm going to select item number. And for this demonstration, I want to show you one other possibility that this tool has, and that is if you want to validate or do a validation test for any particular field in the form, you can go and do a right click on the quantity, for example, and task recorder and hit validate. I will hit current value, and that will note that we want to do a validation on this field. I'm doing this for you to show you a possibility how this validation looks later before we prepare the parameters for the Airset tool. I'm going to save my record, and that will conclude our purchase order creation. Stop. And I'm going to save this to BC. You have several possibilities to save the recordings. You can directly save it to LCS, or you can skip LCS and directly save it to as a developer recording and upload that to Azure DevOps. I will return to the main menu for the task recording. And I want to point out one more thing here. This number of the purchase order, I'm going to copy this number. And as I said previously, it is important for you to start every task recorder from the main menu, from the main dashboard. So the purchase order confirmation, I'm not going to start from the purchase order that I was on, but I'm going to start from here, from the main dashboard. I'm going to create the second recording, which is PO confirmation. And I'm going to hit start and navigate to all purchase orders. This step, it is important to filter and find your purchase order in this list of orders, because the automation tool cannot know which is it the last or the first on the list. So you have to search for that particular record in order to ensure that you have the right record to confirm. So we search for our purchase order, and now I'm going to confirm it. Once this recording is done, we're going to upload them in the LCS on each of the business tasks that we created there. Okay, let me stop the recording and save that to PC. And the second one has been saved. Now I'm navigating to the business process modeler. First, to the purchase order creation, there is an option here on the right side to upload. PO create. Upload. And now I'm going to upload the confirmation. Great. So we have our task recordings uploaded. What is important here to note that the business process modeler and the library itself, I'm going to hit here to the libraries. You can see that in this library where we uploaded task recordings, we have an option to synchronize this with Azure DevOps, synchronize test cases. And what it does is when I navigate to each of them, for example, on the first one, and onto the requirements section here, we will see that a work item and with that test case ID has been created in Azure DevOps. So with that synchronization, which you have it here as well, synchronized test cases, you can see, you can sync these two applications, the Lifecycle Services and Azure DevOps. For this one, we have a test case 836, and for the second one, we have a test case with the number 837. Okay, so we are done with LCS. We have our test cases in Azure DevOps. So let's go there. I have here a test plan for which I'm going to create a new testing suite that I'm going to create called DynamicsCon TS. And on that one, I'm going to attach these two new existing recordings. So we have our test cases, 836, 837, add them both. And here you can reorder them as you want. I can open one just to show you that you have here all the steps that you did in the recording, and you have one attachment here with the recording itself. Now, Airset Tool comes into an action. I have on my desktop the installation of that desktop application, which is open here. And you can see that I don't have my newly created plan suite. So I'm going to hit load in order to refresh and load and sync with Azure DevOps. Now I have my test cases here. What I need to do now, these are only records with the recordings. We still don't have any executable files in order to automate the process. In order to do that, we will hit here, new, and generate test execution and parameter files. What that does, you can see the progress down in the left corner. It is creating test artifacts, one C# file one DLL executable file, and an XML file with the steps of the recording, and one Excel file, which you can see here in the parameter, where you can manage the input parameters for each of these test cases. If I open the first one, and here on the Excel, I can open this file. And you can see that we have in the general section some general information about the test case. We have the recording name, which company that has been executed. You can specify a test user for this particular test case. You have an option to pause between test cases. You have a certain workflow or batch process to wait, or you want to time out this the execution of this test case if it's not succeeded within a time frame, and several other information. On the bottom here, let me explain what you have. You have additional tabs where you can validate, message validate. So if you create a customer that the customer already exists, that particular message as a message, you can validate. Then here we have some navigation actions, and you will have a tab for each form that this test will hit. Here we have on the purchase table, we have our item number that we specified. And you remember that I hit validate on the quantity itself. You can use Excel operators in order to validate the value of the quantity. And also, there's a possibility this tool offers is to use Excel formulas for some options. Now we are back to our scenario. You remember we copied the purchase order ID. So this is how it is copied, or it is represented in the Excel parameters. You have a purchase table that the purchase ID for the work item 836 has been copied. This will be our input parameter for our second test scenario. So let me close this. Save. And if I open this one, it will get clearer to you. In the purchase here, you have a fixed value at this moment for the purchase order that we created in our recording. But we want to play back and run this automatically several times. So we don't want a fixed value, but we want to change these two test cases together, and which PO has been created, that one we want to confirm in the second step. That chaining is done on this way. So we are copying the output value from the first one, and it will be an input value in our second test case. I will save this and close. So now we are ready to run. There's an option here to run these test cases. And now we can see Airset in action. This is all done automatically. You can see here on the top, it says that Microsoft Edge is being controlled by automated test software, and it is repeating the steps that we did. create new purchase order 251. We have our item number and we hit save. That's it for the first scenario. And we can see the results here, which is passed. Now we are on to the second scenario. That's why I mentioned it is important to search for your record. This way, the newly created purchase order can be found in the list of records and can be confirmed, the process of the confirmation. Great. So we have seen how to chain these two cases. Since we are satisfied with everything, how the parameters files are set and populated, and we want them to be reusable, we want to upload them into Azure DevOps. Artifacts successfully uploaded. I can show you where they were uploaded. So here, if I open this, just a second. I might need to refresh the screen. Okay, a refresh was needed. You can see here on the right side, we have 5 files. We have the C# file, we have the DLL executable file, we have the Excel parameter file where we populate and change all the values in order to reuse them again for this automation test. And we have an Excel XML file with action steps. What I want to show you next is how the results appear in Azure DevOps. We navigate to test runs here. And we can see the regression suite automation tool for this DynamicsCon test suite completed successfully. 2 out of 2 are done. Here are the test results for each of them. You can see that each of the steps are marked, how they are done, which parameters have been used, and everything. So you can inspect and see and diagnose your test results. I can show you how a failed one appears. So here we have 3, 1 failed. Here in the test results, in the failed one, along with the error message where I have used a fixed value without that parameterization, I can see in the attachments that I have several log files and also an image of the moment of the failure when actually that step failed from D365 Finance and Operation. Okay, now let me show you some other possibilities. Okay, some other possibilities that this tool have, and that is we have recorded the PO creation one time, but we want to be able to reuse that recording for several other PO creations, and not only in this testing suite, but also in some others. What we can do is we can generate derived one That means that we are creating a separate record with its own test case ID in Azure DevOps, with its own parameters file, but it will use the recording that we have in the first scenario. Here, this one is marked as a derived one. And you can change the parameter file and reuse this as many times you need. This way, you can record a scenario one time and reuse it in several other test scenarios. Okay, where I have prepared some tips and tricks for you. As I mentioned during my demonstration, what is important for you to know before you start doing a task recording? It is important to record them into a smaller test cases divided per role, and you should divide them if you have in between a step where you need to wait for a certain batch process to finish or an external task to finish. You should always start from the main dashboard from home, and you want to copy your values during the task recording. So you're not data dependent when you run this test automatically. There are several other possibilities how to randomize the numbers and the creation of new records. And feel free to reach if you want us to help you with that. And keep validations in mind. As I showed with the quantity, there is a possibility to validate certain date ranges. You can validate, for example, on-hand quantity for a certain item before you do your picking process and things like that. In the limitations that I want to point out for you is that this tool is dependent on the task recorder. So everything that is outside of this task recorder and cannot be recorded cannot be part of the automation testing process with this tool. So any other integrations that with external applications are not supported. You can validate the input and output values as they come into a D365, but you cannot test the integration as such. I want to mention for the e-commerce platform, there is a possibility to automate that testing process with D365. Microsoft has made that available. And also, there is a framework available for the external warehousing application. So you can use that application as well and test your business process in the whole run. And as I mentioned, everything outside the task recorder, like file uploads and things like that, cannot be tested automatically with this tool. Thank you all for attending this session, and thank you DynamicsCon for giving us a possibility to share our knowledge. Please join us in the conference chat to answer any of your questions that you might have for this session.